Today, I want to reflect on transitions in life and offer one specific practice that may be helpful as you're going through one. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. Pastor Tim Westermeyer here, Senior Pastor of St. Philip the Deacon in the western suburbs of Minneapolis. Good to be with you, as always. So in my sermon this past weekend, I was discussing, and we'll link to this if you're interested, I was discussing a moment of transition in our family's life. Our youngest son, Andrew, is heading off to college. Actually, we're dropping him off a week from today, from the day we're taping this. And so that means we're sort of closing one chapter in our life, the chapter of having kids at home. He's our youngest again. And so we're no longer doing the elementary, middle school, high school thing. We're sort of moving into a new moment. And I was chatting with him about that transition, and trying to be helpful. I hope it was a helpful conversation, father. And I was reflecting on a transition in my own life, and I want to share just one thing I did during that transition, which I found helpful. I'm not necessarily saying this is a generalizable kind of practice, and I would love to hear what practices you have done during moments of transition in your own life. But for me, this was helpful, and I thought I would share it. And so this was actually at the very beginning of what would end up being my transition from the world of business, working in communications and public relations, into the world of ministry. And I may have shared some of this story in the past, I can't remember. But at the time, my wife and I were living in Los Angeles. I had made the decision to quit a very good job in LA. I was working at a high-tech PR firm. My office looked out over the Pacific Ocean, and leave all that behind and test out this intuition that I wanted to go to graduate school. This is, by the way, mind you, before the days of the internet when you could do virtual tours or Zoom with people. So this is an important point. Before Amy, my wife, and I picked up and moved from LA to South Bend, Indiana, where I ended up going to graduate school, we had never once, neither one of us, had ever visited South Bend. I had never been on the campus of Notre Dame. And I started thinking to myself before we made that move, is this a good idea? Am I making a huge mistake here? And I was genuinely worried about that. I thought, oh my gosh, what if we get to South Bend and I think, oh, Tim, you have just ruined your life. And so what I chose to do, I sort of, I felt moved to do this, was I wrote sort of a list of things to my future self so that when we got to South Bend, if I thought to myself, oh my gosh, Tim, why did you make that harebrained, dumb, awful decision when you were living in LA, I could read what I had written to myself and at least have a sense of why I had made such a terrible mistake with my life. And so the point is, I guess, as we make transitions in life, and again, I'm not sure this is generalizable in all circumstances, but it might be helpful in some. If you are intentionally choosing to make a transition, it might be helpful from a place and a time of familiarity and comfort, a place that you know, like the office I was at in LA, to write down your thoughts about why you are making that move, why you're choosing to make that transition, why you're choosing to close one chapter and open another. Now, in my own case, this is interesting. Once we made that move, I actually never looked back or questioned whether it was the right decision. I was delighted to be in grad school. I was excited to be there. But the act of writing those thoughts to my future self sort of shook loose some things in my own, psyche or soul, which indeed ended up being the beginning of my transition to ministry, which was not what I was expecting from that exercise, but it ended up being helpful in that way. So again, I share that maybe as something that you can use in your own life if you are going through a time of transition, if it's helpful. If it's not, I guess a couple of final thoughts. One would be, if you have found practices to be meaningful or helpful in your own life as you have made transitions, all of us are making transitions in lives all the time, right? Some by choice, some are forced on us. If you have found practices or acts that have been helpful as you move from one chapter of life to another chapter of life, I would love to know what those are, as would, I'm sure, other listeners of this. And then the other thing is, just as Amy and I make this transition in our lives, I would welcome your prayers. It's going to be as these things are. We're moving sort of from children at home. We're not quite empty nesters because we have our daughter, Sarah, but it will be a very significant moment, inflection point in our lives. And we would all welcome your prayers of support as we go through this transition. So, thanks as always for being with me today. As always, be well, stay in touch, and God bless.